So in this presentation, I'd like to give you a bit of background to our work in this area, introduce you to the research findings. Okay. Thanks. Introduce you to the research findings, and finally to look briefly at how we think these relate to the development of a post-2015 framework. So as most of you will be familiar with, our approach to development is rooted in Catholic social teaching, with an emphasis on a rights-based approach. This approach has informed our engagement with the MDGs since their inception in 2000. While welcoming the global political commitment to tackling poverty that the MDGs represented, from the outset, Trócaire criticised the MDGs for failing to reflect a multifaceted understanding of poverty, the focus on the symptoms of poverty rather than the structural causes, and the weaknesses in accountability for the implementation of the framework. It was against this background that we began our consideration of the post-2015 process. To support and shape our thinking, we decided to embark on a piece of field research with the aim of grounding our analysis in the experience of the people we are working with, and to explore how a rights-based approach to development might be applied to a post-2015 framework. The field research was carried out in the latter half of 2012. We spoke to 240 people in communities across 6 countries: India, Pakistan, Haiti, Nicaragua, Sierra Leone, and Malawi. Using questionnaires and focus group discussions, we spoke to 240 people. We spoke to 90 women and 90 men over the age of 30, and 30 younger women and 30 younger men between the ages of 18 to 30. We drew on human rights principles to develop the methodology, and key questions asked were, what are the most important things you need to live a good life, and how do you currently experience these? What is your experience of participation? Do you feel discriminated against in accessing your priorities? And can you hold duty bearers to account? Our aim was not to generate statistically relevant data on the views of people living in poverty on what the post-2015 goals should be. With our small sample size across a variety of different contexts, this was a qualitative, participatory piece of research, essentially a listening exercise, which has provided us with insights into the daily experiences of people in accessing their rights. So what did they tell us? With regard to research participants' priorities for living a good quality of life, there was a strong emphasis on economic and social rights, and importantly, income and food security. In relation to both the right to work and the right to food, across all the countries, people's access to these was both inadequate and insecure. Food shortages are a common reality. Participant responses indicated that women are disproportionately affected. They are more likely to go hungry during food shortages. They face more obstacles in accessing an income. This is as a result of a variety of barriers for women, social, cultural, or legal, that prevent them to access land, credit, or education. Social norms around the role of women and appropriate income activities were also indicated as an important factor. Income was seen by participants as a gateway to their other rights, including food, education, and health. They identified a key barrier to their ability to access these rights as a lack of enabling policies. Their suggestions for enabling policies included measures to support access to land for people living in poverty, affordable credit, fair prices for their produce, and investment in agricultural production capacity. The need for measures to improve education and training opportunities were highlighted in particular by young people in all countries. The importance of income for accessing other rights was also connected to people's experience of corruption. Many participants were referred to having to pay bribes in order to access employment, education, or even healthcare. Corruption is thus presenting an additional barrier for people living in poverty to access their rights. When asked how they currently coped and what they do when their situation becomes particularly difficult, government supports were referred to by a few people in India and Malawi and Nicaragua. The majority of people across all countries, however, relied completely on support from family, neighbours and the community, or coped autonomously by adapting strategies such as eating or selling wild resources, seeking day labour on other people's land, or selling assets. With regard to people's experience of participation, there was a mixed picture both between and within countries. In a number of countries, for example, India and Nicaragua, people reported having access to both informal and formal decision-making spaces, and there was a general perception of participation. In other countries, people reported that access to decision-making spaces was significantly limited, in particular with regard to more formal decision-making spaces, such as local government. In Pakistan, participation was basically non-existent. Across almost all countries, women and young people reported less access to decision-making spaces, whether informal or formal. The majority of people across all countries noted lacking the sufficient information necessary to participate in decision-making, in particular formal decision-making involving the government. Furthermore, among those who felt they could participate, the majority said they did not believe their participation would make a difference, that it is the social, economic, and political elites that influence the decision-making. People cited their socioeconomic status, poor education, gender, caste, religion, or political affiliation as affecting their ability to participate in and influence decision-making processes. With regard to their experience of accountability, there was again a mixed picture across the countries. With the exceptions of India and Nicaragua, a majority of participants said they did not feel they could raise a request or a complaint with a local duty bearer at any level. Lack of sufficient knowledge of local duty bearers and entitlements were noted as undermining people's ability to seek accountability in all countries. Again, their socioeconomic status, lack of education, gender, caste, religion, or political affiliation were cited as barriers to this. Among those who felt they could seek accountability, they said in their experience they did not believe that this did not achieve change in practice. In some cases, local duty bearers were felt to have limited power. Others indicated that corruption undermines any chance of accountability, as in many cases the duty bearer is either the perpetrator or is complicit in the corruption. In Pakistan, for bonded labourers, landlords are in some cases also the elected official, meaning bonded labourers are in fact bonded to serve their duty bearer. For many of the bonded labourers we spoke to, the concept of seeking or achieving accountability is simply not understood, even while they have a strong sense of the injustice of their situation. Many examples of human rights violations were shared. However, participants were unable to provide any examples of where they sought and achieved accountability from duty bearers at any level. As a result, across all countries, participants expressed a strong mistrust of their duty bearers, which translated in many cases into a sense of helplessness and apathy. In Pakistan, Haiti, and Nicaragua, participants also perceived demanding accountability as dangerous, referring to past examples of attempts by community members that led to physical harm. The majority of participants who considered themselves to be discriminated against in accessing their rights, which ranged from most participants in Pakistan to around 50% in most other countries, identified their socioeconomic status, the fact of being poor, as the main grounds for this discrimination. Examples provided included both direct discrimination, for example, people reported being viewed negatively and treated differently by authorities and public service providers because they are poor, and indirect, because they do not have the economic resources to access the services. Many of these respondents suggested that rights are only for the elite. Participants in some countries, such as India, Pakistan, and Haiti, saw the caste, religion, or race-based discrimination they experience as being one and the same as the socioeconomic discrimination they experience, indicating the deeply rooted nature of these forms of identity-based discrimination. Gender was the second most basis for discrimination. Participants noted the implications of this for women, ranging from a lack of access to income opportunities, to education, and to decision-making. As noted in the beginning, we conducted this research with the aim of grounding our thinking in relation to a post-2015 framework in the experience of the people we work with in accessing their rights. The data shows clearly that the people we spoke to are living without some of the most basic rights. The data also indicates the very limited ability, extremely limited ability, and non-existent ability in some cases, of the people we spoke to in accessing decision-making spaces and achieving accountability. The fact that because they were poor, exacerbated by multiple other forms of discrimination, to participate was seen as a critical barrier to their ability to access their rights, to access decision-making, and to seek and achieve accountability, is illustrative of the important normative and structural barriers to poverty reduction. Bound to invest their time and energy in survival, unable to seek structural change, people remain trapped in chronic poverty. Acknowledging this reality for many of the poorest and most marginalised people, what can a global framework for development offer them? We believe our research demonstrates the value of a rights-based approach to development as a means of ensuring a focus on the poorest and most marginalised people and on the structural barriers that prevent them from improving their lives. We believe this brings a valuable lens to debates on development priorities and the means to achieve them. The question of how to apply a human rights-based approach to a post-2015 framework is much debated amongst human rights advocates. In our view, a rights-based approach to a post-2015 framework will have to go further than articulating any goals in terms of rights and must incorporate the human rights principles, including equality, participation, and accountability. We also believe a rights-based approach will require the inclusion of governance in the post-2015 framework, with implications for governance systems at global, national, and subnational levels. The next steps in our research will look at options and implications for how the inclusion of participatory and accountable governance could be one means for a post-2015 framework to meaningfully operationalise a rights-based approach to development. As we noted this morning, governance is one of the many issues being debated by the wide variety of actors involved in the post-2015 framework debates, with views ranging from the standpoint that they shouldn't be included at all, to the views, including our own, that they should be among the goals articulated in a new framework. While many believe governance issues in general, and human rights in particular, are unrealistic and divisive in the process, the fact is human rights are universal, and they are enshrined in long-standing international norms and legal frameworks. Furthermore, a human rights approach promotes development that prioritises the poorest and most vulnerable in society. We believe this is an approach to development that all countries, in their capacity as national governments, donor governments, or international partners, should adopt. This would reflect the poverty-focused, universally applicable framework that is being called for in all the debates. A rights-based approach will be rejected by some or by many, and we expect this. It will also be held at a distance by those who support it in principle but who wish to be pragmatic in order to achieve progress. We're cognizant of these political realities. However, we're also reflecting on the experience of the MDGs and acknowledging the challenging poverty, equity, and sustainability crisis we are now facing. We cannot know whether the implementation of the goals that will be agreed in a new framework or the new norms that such a framework may establish are to be this framework's greatest contribution. We believe the debates we are having now, within the context of the post-2015 framework, and importantly in other fora, are an important contribution to shaping the norms, values, and institutions that will influence development and international cooperation into the future. On this basis, we believe promoting a focus on the ability of the poorest and most marginalised people to secure their human rights and a shift in norms, values, and governance systems to deliver this is critically important.